Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I have to admit, when I opened up the news this week and saw Steve Burton's name splashed across the tabloid headlines once again, my heart just sank a little bit. We all know and love Steve for his incredible, decades-long portrayal of Jason Morgan on General Hospital. He is a fixture in our living rooms, someone we have watched grow, evolve, and navigate the most dramatic storylines imaginable. But seeing his real-life personal struggles play out in the public eye is a completely different experience. It is always so tough when the lines between the dramatic lives of our favorite soap opera characters and the very real, very painful lives of the actors themselves begin to blur. This week, the news is entirely focused on the escalating and heartbreaking legal battle between Steve and his ex-wife, Sheree Gustin. And it is a situation that truly makes you pause and feel for everyone involved. For the past couple of years, the messy and highly publicized divorce between Steve and Sheree has been heavily covered by the press, and it has been a rocky road, to say the least. When a marriage ends, it is always a tragedy. But when it ends under the glaring spotlight of the media, every single disagreement is magnified 1,000 times over. We have followed along as they officially parted ways, and we all hoped that the dust would eventually settle so they could both move on peacefully. However, it seems that the storm is far from over. The core of this ongoing conflict is their beautiful 12-year-old daughter, Brooklyn. Custody battles are notoriously difficult, and this one is proving to be incredibly contentious, tearing at the heartstrings of anyone who has ever had to navigate the complexities of family separation. It is actually quite surreal to think about what Steve is going through in his personal life right now while watching what his character, Jason Morgan, is dealing with on our screens. Right now, on General Hospital, Jason is walking a treacherous path alongside Sonny Corinthos, desperately trying to leave the dangerous criminal underworld behind them once and for all. Jason is putting everything on the line, facing terrifying hurdles and dangerous enemies, all because he is fiercely determined to protect his loved ones and build a safer future. Jason's entire motivation right now is family and loyalty. Then, the cameras stop rolling, and Steve goes home to face a completely different kind of battle for his own family. The parallel between the fictional fight for his loved ones and the real-life fight for his daughter is striking, and it really makes you wonder how heavy that emotional burden must be for him to carry every single day. Let us dive into the details of what is actually happening in the courtroom. Over the summer, specifically back in June, the tensions regarding the custody of young Brooklyn finally reached a boiling point. Steve took legal action, filing documents with the court that painted a very frustrating picture of his current co-parenting situation. Fans of General Hospital immediately rallied behind him as they have done so many times before, offering their unwavering support. In those court documents, Steve made some very serious claims. He stated that Sheree was actively preventing him from seeing his daughter, completely disregarding the custody agreement they had previously established. As a parent, I can only imagine the sheer panic and heartbreak of feeling like you are being blocked from your own child. That kind of separation goes against every natural instinct a parent has. Steve's legal filings went into even more specific detail about the daily struggles he is facing. He claimed that his ex-wife was consistently creating unnecessary obstacles, putting up roadblocks that made it nearly impossible for him to exercise his court-ordered custody rights. But there was one detail that really stood out to me and highlighted just how complicated blended families can become. Steve stated that Sheree repeatedly refused to allow his new wife, Michelle Lundstrom, to pick up Brooklyn on his behalf. Now, we all know that when a family expands and new spouses enter the picture, the dynamics shift dramatically. It requires so much grace, patience, and compromise from everyone involved. For Steve, having his new wife help with school pickups or visits is probably just a normal part of their new family routine. But for Sheree, it is clearly a boundary she is not willing to cross. Think about how incredibly stressful that must be for everyone trying to coordinate a simple drop-off or pickup. Co-parenting is already a delicate dance, but when communication breaks down and resentment builds up, the simplest tasks become monumental battles. I feel so much empathy for the frustration Steve must be experiencing. You have a court order, you have a plan, and yet you find yourself completely powerless to enforce it without dragging the situation back in front of a judge. It is a terrible feeling to have your hands tied when it comes to your own flesh and blood. You just want to be a father. You want to spend time with your little girl, and instead, you are filling out legal paperwork and consulting with attorneys just to get a weekend visit. It is exhausting just reading about it, let alone living it day in and day out. But, as my mother always used to tell me, there are always two sides to every single story, and the truth usually lies somewhere in the messy middle. While Steve's claims certainly paint a picture of an alienated father, Sheree Gustin is not staying silent. She is making absolutely sure that her voice is heard and that her perspective on this family crisis is brought to the light. And I think it is so important that we listen to her side as well, because a mother's protective instinct is a powerful, undeniable force. Sheree is pushing back hard against the narrative that she is the villain in this story. In fact, she is pointing the finger directly back at Steve, claiming that his lifestyle and his choices are the real root of the problem they are facing with their daughter. According to a brand new report from US Weekly, Sheree filed her own explosive lawsuit this past August, and her allegations give us a completely different view of the situation. Sheree claims that Steve has essentially distanced himself from Brooklyn through his own actions. The most shocking part of her filing is the accusation that Steve has moved across the country not just once but twice without taking Brooklyn with him. When I read that, it really made me stop and think. Moving across the country is a massive life event. For a 12-year-old girl, stability is everything. They are in middle school, they are forming deep friendships, they are figuring out who they are. To have a parent move so far away multiple times has to be incredibly unsettling and deeply confusing for a child trying to find her footing in the world. Sheree explained in her court documents that she had previously signed a specific clause regarding his relocation because she genuinely believed it was in the best interest of her daughter at the time. It sounds like she was trying to accommodate his career or his life changes, perhaps hoping they could make a long-distance arrangement work despite the obvious challenges. But clearly, that arrangement has completely fallen apart. When a mother feels that a father's transient lifestyle is disrupting her child's sense of security, the claws are going to come out. Sheree is positioning herself as the rock in Brooklyn's life. She explicitly stated in her documents that she has always been the stable parent. Those two words carry so much weight in a family court, and they are clearly meant to contrast sharply with Steve's bi-coastal movements. Furthermore, Sheree dropped another major bombshell in her legal response. She claimed that Steve does not even have a legal, stable residence on the West Coast for their daughter to stay in. This is a fascinating and deeply concerning detail. Steve works in Los Angeles because General Hospital films in California. If he is spending significant time there for work, but allegedly does not have a proper home set up for a child, how can a custody arrangement realistically function? A hotel room or a temporary rental is not a home for a preteen girl. She needs her own space, her own bed, a place where she feels safe and grounded. If Sheree's claims are true, it is completely understandable why she would be hesitant to send her daughter out west. What mother would want to send her child into an unstable living situation? So, we are left looking at two completely conflicting realities. On one hand, we have a father who feels he is being maliciously boxed out of his daughter's life by a bitter ex-wife who refuses to accept his new marriage. On the other hand, we have a mother who feels she is single-handedly providing all the stability and grounding for a child whose father is constantly moving and lacks a proper home base. It is a classic, heartbreaking standoff. As an outsider looking in, it is so easy to jump to conclusions or pick sides based on who we like better on television. We have loved Steve Burton for decades. He feels like family to us. But in the real world, away from the scripts and the studio lights, these are real human beings dealing with incredibly painful, complicated emotions that cannot be solved in a single hour of television. The person my heart breaks for the absolute most in this entire ordeal is young Brooklyn. 12 years old is such a tender, vulnerable age. It is that awkward, beautiful transition between childhood and being a teenager. It is a time when you desperately need both of your parents to be a steady, calming presence in your life. Instead, she is the focal point of a bitter legal war that is being splashed across grocery store tabloids and internet news sites. Imagine being a young girl and having your friends or classmates potentially reading about your parents fighting over you in the news. It is an unfair burden for any child to carry. No matter who is right or who is wrong in the eyes of the law, the emotional toll on that little girl is the true tragedy of this situation. Let us talk a little more about the introduction of a new spouse into a fragile co-parenting dynamic, because I think this is something so many of us can relate to in our own lives. When Steve married Michelle Lundstrom, it was a beautiful new chapter for him. Finding love again after a painful divorce is something to be celebrated. However, for the children and the ex-spouse, it represents a massive shift in reality. The presence of a stepmother can trigger deep insecurities and fears. When Steve asked Michelle to pick up Brooklyn, he likely saw it as a simple logistical help from his partner. But to Sheree, it might have felt like a replacement or an intrusion into her sacred bond with her daughter. These emotional landmines are everywhere in a divorced family. It takes years of careful, respectful communication to navigate them. And unfortunately, it seems Steve and Sheree are currently caught right in the middle of a terrible emotional minefield.